Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap this week up with a full album review, going through an entire album, track by track, exploring what each song does in isolation and it's part of the larger artwork. Today we're going to be looking at the final album that the Microphones put out, although that's kind of an interesting way to phrase it because the album's called Mount Eerie. It came out in 2003. This actually is the album that came after The Glow Part 2, which I have done a full album review of as well. The main member, and maybe the only member of the Microphones, is Phil Elverum. And after this point, instead of creating music under the label of the Microphones, it changed to Mount Eerie. Continued to write music that, at least to me, sounds fairly similar to what he produced with the Microphones, just under a different name. So, kind of the final album for the Microphones, but also kind of not, depending on how you perceive what the Microphones are, whether it's just a band name or the collective work of Phil. Regardless, we have 5 tracks here, 40 minutes in length. Half of that is in this opening track. Everything else is like 3, 6, 4, but 17 minutes to kick off the album. So without further ado, let's dive into this. See what's going on with track 1, The Sun. Also, a quick note while this starts up. This album's very quiet. Like, very quiet. I put about a 20 decibel gain on the music, and that should level it out to the level that all the music is I have on the channel. What is even going on here? But I don't know if the album is intended to be listened to this loud. Maybe it is supposed to be consistently a quiet experience. But for the sake of being able to hear most of it, I have bumped the audio up with the understanding that maybe this isn't the intended listening experience. So far, a lot of white noise, and that was like audio jack crackling. And then these hums. That's it. That's 2 minutes in. That's all the music we've had. Very sparse, very minimal. Ooh, like a heartbeat. It's almost sub-bass level, but there is a pulsing. You can actually see it pretty clearly in the volume leveler over there. Volume leveler, the volume bars visualizer. There's even a cool like panning thing that goes on too with each beat. Almost like a marching snare idea. It was present for a second and then faded. definitely something I think I need to take notes on. Lots of use of panning. I thought it was a muffled snare in the center, but toms and bass, I think, more so. Layered rhythmic ideas on top of multiple auxiliary percussion. Oh, there is a pitched instrument back there. Is that plucked string? Very compressed bit of clipping in there. Very groovy, lots of syncopation to it. I've noticed a lot of that too, dynamic shifts, whether it's panning like that, but also fade-ins and fade-outs. Normally I'd call crescendos and decrescendos, rising and falling of volume. More clipping. But I think most of this is done on the production side of things as far as the volume changes. So that brass stack felt like French horns. I wonder why French horns? Good instrument, just not the usual choice. Sample field recording of people outside. Tuba. I've heard some wild stuff from Phil. This experimental, abstract intro to this album, or is this just the way it's going to be? Regardless, it's up there. This is one of the more inventive things I've heard from him. Water. It's obviously trying to tell a story. And I think it's interesting that we're seeing less and less changing of ideas and more stacking of layers. Old ideas aren't going away, they're just acting as foundation for new ones. A really good slow burn. As much as this isn't something I'll probably re-listen to, it's one of those things that's the novelty of the experience I think is more important to me, at least right now. It's not really something. I'll continue that thought later.
Handkerchief on the shore. See my arm raised high. See that ship sail off with its sails
very harsh
aloft.
mute on that guitar.
And see me dry my eyes and see more salty tears flow as my house is blown wide. And see me watch the waves roll in from somewhere. See me squint my eyes. See me learn to live without my loved ones. See me scan the skies and see the flock of birds goodbye and turn to go inside. But I feel you on my neck. You are above. See me reach up, see me touch my neck, and see my fingers recoil, see the life
Interesting
come
rhythm, man.
back
It's
into my body. See me living wide and see me look from side to side and tiptoe in your light. See me look at you and lose my sight. And while my eyes burned, I saw it all. flagship rising under red sail. See it fill the sky, see it billow up, see their gleaming eyes, and hear their scary trumpets. See me run in terror for the mountain. See me scramble high and see me burned and blind and all hopeless and barren. See me sprawled out, see me crawl and whine. See me search for signs, and I see you, weird and high. You are above fire. You are above.
Alright, that does transfer into the next track. Real quick, I think I figured out the audio issue. Spotify updated just before I started recording this, and I noticed the volume bar on Spotify is halfway right now. So I'll adjust that when I go check out the lyrics and see if that's the culprit. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be maxed out though. Alright, this exists in two parts. There is the intro. The first 11 minutes of the song, instrumental, expressively abstract, not really musical through the most of it. That's where the abstract part comes in. It uses musical ideas, rhythm, pitch, and occasionally harmony. Well, we don't really get too much harmony within it. So mostly just rhythm and pitch and texture, and arranging this in time. That is sort of the baseline of what music is. Sounds and silence arranged in time. So we have musical ideas, but it's abstract. It doesn't use these ideas in their traditional functional roles. It's designed, I think, in order to evoke an atmosphere, an image, to create a musical rendition of maybe something felt or understood, maybe an emotion or an event, something along those lines. It does evolve into something very rhythmically textured with no melody in it, really, but pitches, sure. The guitars show up there. And then this transfers into the second part of the song, which is the emo post-rock thing that he's got going on. It's the part with the vocals to it. I want to talk about that part first, not because I think it's more important, but because it's where my bread and butter is for the most part. I'm good at talking about music that's traditional. Abstract musical stuff is difficult for me. You either get it or you don't. At least with the second half of this song, I can say, oh, these are the musical properties. This is the rhythmic things, the harmonic things. I can focus on that even if I don't understand it. I can still appreciate and explain what's happening. So I think we're going to start there since I have some sort of grasp of it. We have Phil on vocals, and then stuff happening around him. Now, there is a melodic element, that's the vocal line. There are harmonic elements, usually the vocals against some pitches that exist around it. There's also rhythmic ideas, though they're very jagged. A lot of it comes from a combination of the sparse percussive sound that we have and the guitar that gives us this odd rhythmic phrase that bounces between downbeats and upbeats while also incorporating one quarter of a beat accent. And basically, if your beats are like 1, 2, 3, 4, you can divide each of those up into 4 sets: 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a. And if we have, I never really picked up on it, but there's a guitar accent that happens in here that is either on the E or the ah, either at the 25% of the way to the next beat or the 75% of the way to the next beat, but not in the exact middle between the two beats. It creates an interesting rhythmic flow to the entirety of the thing because it's already playing around with downbeats and offbeats, introducing this concept of something fairly arrhythmic while still providing a clear rhythmic pattern. It is repeated over and over, even if it isn't groovy in the traditional sense, even if it would be difficult to for an average person to groove or move their body or dance to, there is still a rhythmic pulse to it. But that throws everything off. It is an irregularity within something that, while still being unusual, keeps a consistency to its own format. So we do have a rhythmic thing. We have a harmonic thing too. This is very microphones, very Phil right here. The harmonic side of things is rough at best. I still don't know if Phil can't sing in tune or chooses not to. I don't know that I've ever brought this up, and honestly, it probably doesn't matter because the art is still what the art is, but I don't think I've ever heard Phil sing a song in the same tonality as the rest of the instruments that he's singing with. Now, sometimes this absolutely works. It created a wild level of dissonance in the song, The Glow Part 2, that brought me to tears the first time I heard it. But it also, in equal parts, leads me to hear harmonic ideas that I'm just not very fond of, as his singing and the pitches that he hits is in contention with, it's clashing with the pitches that are playing alongside it. And that actually happens in here more than once. In fact, there at the end, when we had the really big guitar tone filling up the final like minute or two of the song, and he begins humming something and holding out these long notes underneath it. He's really, tucked in under the band. He's quiet, unusually quiet. The vocals had been a focus up to this point, but he's kind of tucked into the mix here, and just everything he's singing is so dissonant against everything else. It's something that I mostly went with the flow with as far as the rest of the vocal parts of this track, but here at the end it just really stood to me. A lot of opposition harmonically here, a very unstable chord, and I mean that's Phil though. like I said, his knack or his penchant to sing out of tune with the rest of the instruments, it's a blessing and a curse. It creates something very raw that can be very affecting, but it can also create moments like this that are like nails on a chalkboard for me. I often wonder if he has any intentionality to what feels more beautifully raw and what feels more tense and anxious, and if he controls that, or if it's just he's singing what he wants to sing. And wherever it takes him is where it takes him. It's not something that's necessarily pre-planned, but maybe some part of him, maybe conscious or subconscious, is still directing the flow of the melody that he's singing. So that's our odd rhythmic element and our odd harmonic elements here. There's an odd melodic element too to this section. The melodies that he sings are unusual in their phrasing. There usually isn't any sort of pacing or dynamic flow to it. A lot of it is just really quiet, keeping at one single level, just holding this feeling out and residing within it. But when you look at his rhythmic phrasing as well, he will have a string of rigid same length notes and then a couple of things that might create a little bit of syncopation against that, and then he'll just hold out a note for like 4 bars. There is no consistency to it. There's very little traditional movement of melody to it. It's difficult for me to anticipate where Phil is going with these melody lines. That's not something I can always say about him. While he certainly has a unique idea of melodic pacing and flow, there are several tracks on the Glow Part 2, the album, not the song, that I could follow along with and anticipate and see where he's going and be there with him. This song, he rarely ever does that. It is, as far as I can tell, consistently obtuse, chucking the, good melody writing book out the window and saying, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do right here. And we can kind of see that in the atmospheric writing here too. I've only brought up the guitar rhythm here, but there's a lot of interesting choices going on in the instrumentation and what they're playing around the vocals. A lot of it is hyper sparse, not really going for a largeness of size, not going for filling a lot of space in the sound sphere, not even really supporting the vocal line melodically, harmonically, or rhythmically. It's like a bunch of distinct ideas that just all happen to be playing right here, most of them being sparse, with the vocals and the guitar really being the only instruments that are consistent throughout this entire section. Now, I mentioned that the vocals don't have a lot of dynamic quality, but the instrumentals do, particularly the layering in them. Sometimes we will have just the guitar. Sometimes we'll bring in some of the tuba, I think is going on there. I'm not quite sure what that really large, low sound is. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of the horn on like a ship, foghorn. Is that what it's called? But there is a brassiness to it that I don't think I normally attribute to that. And I don't know, the sound sits somewhere between a foghorn and a tuba for me. But being that it's music, my mind is like, well, obviously it's a tuba emulating a foghorn. But with Phil, you never know. He's definitely a bit more of an experimental dude. Maybe he went and sampled some foghorns for this. That seems like something he would do. Regardless, though, the layering of this instrumentation can get pretty dense and it can also get back down. There is a bit of flow to this. This is what helps progress this section, I think. The vocals don't really have a lot of direction to them. They sort of just exist. They have momentum. The vocal line keeps going. There are certainly places, like I said, just holding out notes for what seems to be 4 or 5 bars. Always kind of wondering, all right, dude, I get it. When are you going to stop singing this one note and we can continue this thought that you're on? But generally, the melody has momentum. It's going somewhere. It's just, it never really directs where it's going. It feels like it's running in circles most of the time, but the layering of the instruments and removing of the layers creates an ebb and flow. It creates a pulsing to the sound that the vocals don't give at all. And while I do hear most of the instrumentation as a separate idea to the vocals, like I said, they very rarely have any supporting ideas where they will help each other in one way or another. They feel very distinct and just happen to be existing simultaneously. The movement and pacing and flow of the instruments is certainly helping direct the song while the vocals are giving the momentum for the song. And the two of them combined are creating some sort of movement towards the end of this track. Neither one of them can really do that by themselves. They're providing half of the information. Together, they help lead the listener to the end. Now, the end is just, this is like a post-rock ending. We have taken so long slightly building ideas, removing ideas, and at this point we just have these big fuzzy electric guitars dominating the sounds. It's a massive, large, just wall of sound. I have no idea what that's supposed to represent. It would probably help if I knew what was going on lyrically. It would probably help a lot if I knew what was going on musically, but it is a peak. I absolutely understood this moment. This was huge, both in, size and scope, but also it's the first time I really felt that the song was getting somewhere that it had been trying to for so long. It has always pointed towards a growing, an escalation of something, but we never really found out what that something was. This, I don't know if this is necessarily where I anticipated the song to end, is just on this massive fuzzy drone, but a large point like this makes sense to me. Something like this was what the song was always pointing towards. And so, I do get it from that perspective, from a purely functional perspective. A lot of this song is anticipation for something, and this is a release of tension. But it also creates tension. It releases the anticipation of where is this going, but it creates new anxiety because of the clashing of sounds here. This is not necessarily a resolved sound. It's not a sound that sounds at peace. There's a lot of clashing within it. It's distorted, it's compressed, it's fuzzy, there's a lot of white noise, and the chord itself isn't at rest either. I'm not going to necessarily say that it's a distorted chord where many of the notes are clashing with each other, but there is movement to it. I don't really feel that it's a leading tone. It doesn't feel like it's pushing anywhere because that really requires more information. But it does want to, there is tension it needs to release. There is a home or resolute chord that could come after it. I just don't know what it is because I don't know the rest of the progression. This is just an isolated chord. It doesn't really mean much by itself, but I can hear that it's not at rest. So if that's the second half of this track, what is the first half? Quick rundown here of my notes. White noise drone, thumping that turns to heartbeat, heartbeat that turns to a marching snare, layered percussion on top of that with two rhythmic guitars playing around with panning, field recording of people possibly outside, random French horn or tuba stingers, water or river running by, and then everything cuts out at 1050 for the vocal stack. No, vocals plus synth. That makes more sense. It was a single vocal. I was like, why would I write stack? I have no idea what all this is supposed to represent. At best, I can see it as some sort of birthing of the universe, which I think my mind is in the concept of because the titles of these tracks are the sun, solar system, universe. It already has me thinking about, cosmic expansion. The song starts from nothing and explodes into a lot of stuff. I mean, Big Bang, right there. But I also don't necessarily feel that in each individual idea. And this is probably where the abstract part kicks in really hard. Suppose this is about the beginnings of the universe. For whatever reason, if that's true, all of this makes sense to Phil to represent the universe. But that doesn't mean it has to make sense to me. Abstract art typically it's very much about bias. What you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. Your experiences, your the ways that you interpret motifs, visual motifs, patterns, and stuff like that, your experiences in life, all of this is going to dictate what you hear or see in abstract art. The heartbeat is obviously a sort of growth, a birth of some sort, life beginning, possibly, but marching snare into layered percussion with a bit of like almost like a tribal element going on. Um, I don't know, man. That's not where my mind would have went for this. And then the field recording of people outside, I mean, yeah, maybe. That's life. That's another way of showcasing life. But then random French horn tuba stingers, water, okay, life again, general ideas. And then all of this caves for typical microphones, vocal work over abstract, minimalistic instrument playing. I don't know. There's like I can get the themes, but it's just not necessarily how I probably would have executed on these ideas, and that's because I'm a different composer. I have different life experiences. I have different ideas of what music or what types of sounds and music I would use to create the same concept. And it's not only just that, it's that what Phil ended up doing just doesn't click with me. I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but I feel like I'm pretty good about hearing music and interpreting it. Sometimes alongside authorial intent, sometimes not. But here, I don't. I'm not going to say I have a good interpretation of this at all because it's so far outside of my understanding of abstract musical ideas like this. The last thing I want to bring up here before we hit the lyrics is just a little concept of distortion that happens on this track often. It's the clipping of it all. A lot of the louder notes have this white noise crackling. In fact, we even heard it at the beginning in the white noise silence, the really quiet stuff. I had mentioned it sounded like someone playing or fiddling with the audio jack or audio cable. But even in some of the louder notes, the drone at the beginning, the drone at the end, the tuba actually, the tuba and French horn, the foghorn possibly, these moments where notes come in, it's just large, loud. There's usually crackling on top of it. I'm curious if this was intentional or just an aspect of the indie rock production. But anytime the song gets big, it feels like it's trying to break free of the constraints of the sound. It's too big for the song. I always kind of envision clipping to be like, the sound sphere, as large as the sound can be, and the sound is filling up all the space, and those crackles, those pops are, the extents of the sphere itself beginning to crack as the pressure is put against it. The song wants to be bigger than it is. When you use clipping properly, you can tell a really cool story with it. And Phil seems like the kind of guy who would do that, and this seems like the kind of song that wants to do that. But, like I said, there's also the other side. This is independent indie rock production. It usually is a bit more mid to lo-fi, it usually is a bit more rough around the edges. It could just be a circumstance of the situation more so than an intentional use of it. I tend to like to give artists the benefit of the doubt, so I'm going to assume it was intentional. But if anyone has insight into that, I would love to know. Alright, I think that's all I need to say about this one. I don't get it, but I'm impressed with it. Making abstract music is difficult, especially since there's less common ground. You make a mainstream song with, guitar sounds and melodies that everyone expects, and it's easy to get into that because it's familiar. But the thing about abstract art, all abstract art, but music, I think even more so, there's no there's nothing familiar to lean on. Everything is new. You're using the ideas of music in fresh ways that might only make sense to you. So I always like to applaud anyone trying to step outside the bounds of music, even if I don't get it, even if I don't like it. It takes guts to do that and then put it out there. You're being vulnerable with the addition that most people might not even get it. So it's uh it's something I like to give a little praise for when I hear it. Let me hit some lyrics and see what's going on here. All right. So I have a little bit of information here from the Headwaters booklet, which appears to have information from Phil. This takes place directly after The Glow Part 2, and while I didn't recognize it at the time, I went and listened to the final track from that album, My Warm Blood, and sure enough, this picks up pretty much where that track leaves off, which I thought he was dead at that point. Whoever the protagonist is of these two albums. Or maybe it's more of a symbolic continuation rather than a literal one. Regardless, we have the white noise, but this time, instead of pushing towards the end of life, it is the beginning of life. And as I expected, there's growth here. The heartbeat is supposed to symbolize the growing, the time in the womb. Mentions that the highly rhythmic, dynamic, explosive, groovy stuff that happens is supposed to be symbolic of speeding up 24 years of life into 5.5 minutes of music, talking about how hectic life is among millions of people living in the world. The three foghorn swells, which I still think that it still sounds like there's a brassiness to them, but according to this, it's all foghorn. The three of them represent different eras or different moments in this person's life. They signify the sweeping changes musically that go on in the instrumental part. From here, we move into the vocal section. It says, see me wave my handkerchief on the shore, see my arm raised high, see that ship sail off with its ships aloft, as with its sails aloft, and see me dry my eyes. See more salty tears flow as my house is blown wide, and see me watch the waves roll in, see me squint my eyes, see me learn to live without my loved ones, see me scan the skies, and see the flock of birds goodbye and turn to go inside. So, he's been left here on the shore of this beach by a ship, and the ship is leaving, presumably with his family, his loved ones in it. He is now alone. He has said goodbye to everything and has said hello to his new surroundings. Then the chorus comes in. It says, but I feel you on my neck, a ball of fire. Now this is interesting because the song is called The Sun, and this is not the first time that this will come up. It's almost as if him and the sun, he realizes they're the only two here. There are birds, but he waves goodbye to them as they fly away. He said goodbye to his family. It's just him on the beach. Except there's also the sun, something you can't touch, but you can feel. And he says he feels it on his neck. He says, "Oh, see me reach up, see me touch my neck, and see my fingers recoil. See the life come back into my body. See me living wide, and see me look from side to side and tiptoe in your light. See me look at you and lose my sight. While my eyes burned, I saw it." So, talking directly to the sun. And maybe even verse 1 was about talking to the sun. He describes waving goodbye to everything, but he says, "See me do this." The sun being the only one there. Also, presumably, he mentioned in the booklet 24 years of life. Maybe the idea of a sun, not necessarily the star, but a male child of parents, a son, S-O-N. I promise I could spell words. Maybe that's supposed to be a parallel here. I don't know. Hopefully they'll explain a little bit more of that. But he looks at the sun and his eyes burn. And while they burn, verse 3 kicks in, here comes a black ship. See it fill the sky, see it billow up, see their gleaming eyes and hear their scary trumpets. This is where the brass kicks in and gets really loud and tense for a while in the music and then fades away. Now I thought the fading, well, I didn't know what it meant, honestly. But here in the story, he runs. That is presumably why they fade away and the song returns to a little bit more of a calm normalcy. He says, see me run in terror for the mountain, see me scramble high, and see me burned and blind, and all hopeless and barren, see me sprawled out, see me crawl and whine, see me search for signs. And I see you, weird and high, a ball of fire. So there's this mountain here, and he runs up it to get away from these trumpets, to get away from the black ship, whose smoke billows up and covers the sky. So this whole song is, I'm now alone. See, here's the thing, too. There's a literal read of this. Been left on a shore by his family. Another ship is chasing him. He runs up a mountain. But the glow part 2 was also metaphorical. Figurative more than literal. At the end, I do believe there was a death, but maybe not a literal physical death of the narrator. Here, I don't think that they're literally left on an island, but they do feel alone. It could be that at 24, this is the first time that they've moved out on their own, or maybe it's the first time they feel lonely after having moved out and gone on their own. Something is chasing them. It could be a representation of anxiety. It could be a representation of fear. I have no idea. But they run towards a mountain. Now, I've never climbed a mountain. Yeah, I've never climbed a mountain. But I bet it's difficult. This is not going to be a simple task. This is not the straightest line to get away from someone you're trying to get away from. This is going to be tough. It's going to slow you down. This is going to be an arduous task. Not necessarily something you would do literally, but figuratively. This could represent putting in work to overcome something, maybe stress, maybe anxiety. It could be the work to get your life back on track. I don't know. That's how I'm seeing it right now, though. I have no metaphor for the sun, though. I'm still kind of hoping that maybe it's a parallel homonym thing, where the sun is important because it's the sun, but he's also a son, and he's trying to find his place as a son. I don't know. That's where I'm at right now, though. So with that said, we'll push into track 2, which is our shortest track. That time will fix itself in a second. I had to double check the whole volume thing, and that was it, honestly. Spotify updated and ruined my whole workflow. What else is new? All right. So yeah, solar systems. We are starting at 0 seconds. That's a holdover from the testing. It is the shortest track though, at 3.5 minutes, which is going to feel infinitely shorter than the sun. Let's dive into it. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
You fireball have rolled away in shaded valleys. So here I am in the creek bed. So here I feel my way in the dark. What wonder, what treasure map, what breaking of day. What stream used to flow here, and now what dusty decay. Let the flash flood begin.
Filling in the space with that little guitar
Wash
melody.
me down the canyon. Quicksand pull me in. Blow over me solar wind. La, 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 la. Your vultures and trees. I know you're out there. Your lanterns on wakes. I know you're out there. Your soccer balls on knees. Through your skirt I see your legs gracefully. I know you're out there. You're swaying and pleased. I know you're out there. Your vultures and trees. I know you're out there in mountainous peaks. Don't let gravity win.
So that's interesting. Has both a fade in and a fade out. And I'm not counting the white noise transition from the last track. That does carry over into this track, but it fades out, and then the vocals and guitar fade in. There's actually a few words at the beginning that I couldn't hear because they were too quiet, and there at the end, more words I couldn't hear because it was too quiet. Almost as if this song is much longer, and all we get is a portion of it, a snippet of the track scooped into it and then scooped out of it. And the song just continues to exist outside of what we have heard here. You don't get that too often. The fade out, sure, the implication that the song can just keep going on forever. Rather, either it's just such a good song, a good jam, that it just lives infinitely in your head. It can get stuck there on loop, or maybe it's thematically about some sort of infinity or repeating cycle. Certainly a lot of ways to use the fade out for great effect, but the fade in is unusual. Sometimes a band will fade in instrumentation, but fade in vocals? This might be the only time I've heard that. Or at least it's the only time I can think that I've heard that. It is an unusual idea. The rest of this track, though, is pretty straightforward for what I expect from a Microphones song. Indie rock, low energy, low stakes, small amount of ideas. I mean, we have the bass, we have the acoustic guitar, we have the drums, which are very sparse idea. We do have some ornamental concepts that exist on the outskirts, very rare, very minimal. They pop up just a couple of times. And then the accompanying vocal part towards the end of the song. That's it. And we don't see too much of a foundational change from start to finish. We do add layers. The drums come in about a minute into the track, just snare on, was it every 4 beats maybe? Then eventually we get some ghost notes with the snare, something to fill in the space between the snare hits. The guitar part gets a little bit more layered. We get that second guitar part in there to fill in for the vocals when they dip out for a couple of bars. We do get some new ideas. It grows over time, but the foundation, that core bass and guitar idea with the vocal melody on top, that doesn't change from start to finish. It is a slow burn, as is what I expect for microphones. Like I said, the Sun was very experimental, very abstract. It's an interesting direction for Phil to go, and one that I don't think is too familiar for him, or I should say, I'm not too familiar with him doing music like that. But this right here is 100% what I expect from this group. It is raw, it is introspective, it is isolating, it is also low energy, minimal. It goes for something a bit more personal rather than bombastic. Massive, massive shift from track one, which I think is wild. Track one is called The Sun. It is a part of the solar system. It should be, thematically, the smaller of the two songs. This one's solar system. The solar system's a lot bigger than the sun. But I wonder if it's about perspective. If there is a parallel where the sun is Phil because he is a sun, or not Phil, but the narrator here, it would feel very large. This is me. This is who I am. You're very close to that idea of identity, of self. But within the solar system, the sun is just one part of it. It would feel smaller, more, it would feel smaller because of that. Maybe that's the purpose of it. I don't know. We'll hit the lyrics in a bit, but I do find it interesting based on title that these songs kind of have the inverse of what I would expect as far as size and intensity. Now, it is kind of somber, as is a lot of Microphone's work. It's not melancholic, though. It just feels a little dreary. But I like the brightness to the tonality of it, too. The acoustic guitar doesn't sound warm and dark. There is a comfort to it, a little bit of warmth, as all acoustic guitars sound like, but there's a brightness to it rather than a darkness. His vocal timbre, he's not going for something a bit lower and chesty and kind of going for a booming voice. It's higher pitch and narrow and thinner. It's softer and brighter. The female vocals at the end, also a very bright sound that accompanies his vocals rather well. Everything, even the bass, as lower pitch as it is, doesn't have a darkness to it. It does have a warm embrace. It is a large sound that sits at the bottom of the song and supports everything, but it also has a brightness to it in its timbre. This is a little different from the Microphones, The Glow Part 2, which I thought overall as an album had something a bit drearier, melancholic, darker, brooding to it. It was an album that consistently brought me down. Now, maybe the lyrics are going to bring me down here, but at least musically, I feel like this is dreary. It's a melancholic, slower track that feels very personal, but there's a brightness to it, a hope, maybe, even. I like that. It ends up complementing the song well and balancing it out. The layering throughout helps too, helps push the song towards its finale, and I love the way that we bring in the extra vocals at the end, originally as a simple call and response, and then, no, starting out with harmony and then moving towards call and response. I thought that worked really well and was a great way to push the song towards still a peak at the end. It's not a post-rock, larger-than-life wall of sound like we heard at the end of track 1, but it is still something larger, bigger, deeper, and more layered than the rest of this track. We are still seeing a growth over time to hit a peak at the end. That's post-rock slow burn right there. Everything I mentioned about Phil's vocal tonality and the melodic writing is here showcased again. The tonality is iffy. Sometimes that rawness works. I don't think we hit anything in here that was really tense in a way that didn't work for me. But like I said earlier, it's not usually my cup of tea. The rawness can be really affecting at times. Most of the time, though, I just roll with it. Not something I would seek out, but not something that actively annoys me or that I dislike. The phrasing is still interesting, though. It's tough to figure out where Phil is going to take a melodic idea. It makes me want to re-listen to the Glow Part 2 because I don't remember bringing this up at all. I can't hum anything from that album, but I don't think there was anything in it that really threw me off. This song, both of these songs so far, have had interesting uses of melody phrasing and flow. All right, let's hit some lyrics. It feels weird to jump back into lyrics so quick, but I mean, this song is a quarter of the length of track 1. All right, so I looked up Headwaters just to double check and see what it was, and comically, it is a pamphlet created by Phil that simply states Headwaters, an attempted explanation of Mount Eerie by the Microphones. You wrote it. Why are you attempting to explain it? But no, I get it. Sometimes as an artist, you make stuff that you only feel. It's tough to explain it to someone else. Sometimes you even make it in a mood, a headspace that you can't return to. Maybe some of the things even you created, you don't understand what they mean. Sometimes you might even just include randomness in it. What did we listen to recently? Where one of the lyricists, was it I don't remember. Dang, I wish I could remember. One of the lyricists, though, had gone on record saying that they just included some lines because they sounded good. And that didn't actually mean anything, so, like, don't look into it. So, I don't know if that's what's going on here. Phil seems like someone who's hyper intentional about what he does, but there's a lot of reasons why an artist might have to attempt to explain their own work, even though they made it. So the song starts out with the fade-in vocals. It says, "Oh, a ball of fire. I'm a ball of fire, a ball of fire." This, I think, does create the beginnings of this parallel of sun and sun, S-U-N-S-O-N. But the sun goes away. And if that parallel is to be drawn, is this a lack of self? Is this a loss of self? He says, "You, fireball, have rolled away in shaded valleys, so here I am in the creek bed. Here I find my way in the dark. What wonder, what treasure map, what breaking of day, what stream used to flow here, and now what dusty decay?" I don't understand this section at all. But if this is about a loss of self, then it's not just wading through the darkness, but also finding the decay of things that used to be. Maybe this was filled with wonder at one point, the childlike wonder, as you grow up and lose that innocence and you begin to see the world for, what it is. It loses its magic and its charm and its wonder. It says a stream used to flow here. There used to be life here. Water is very frequently used as visual metaphor for life. He says, but now it's just dusty decay. And it could be that for whatever reason here, I don't get the literal description, but I do see a metaphorical one. That the sun has left and he's left to interrogate who he is without light. and he finds that it's not great. It's decrepit and breaking down, and things that used to bring joy are no longer around anymore. And the chorus comes in, he says, "Let the flash flood begin, wash me down the canyon, quicksand pull me in." I think this is twofold. One, bring life back to this. Let the flood happen, even if it takes me out. It's better than this darkness. It's better than this lack of life. But he also says, quicksand pull me in. And I'm curious what that's supposed to represent. But he wraps up and says, "Blow over me, solar wind." And I'm glad that we have a little bit of annotation for this one. I probably would have looked this up anyways because I knew solar wind was a spacey thing, but I didn't quite know what it was. Solar winds, though, it's a term to describe streams of particles that fly through space from the sun. And when they pass over the top of our planet, they interact with our magnetic North Pole, and this is what creates the aurora borealis, or the northern lights. So when he says "blow over me, solar wind," is almost as if saying, make something magical happen, bring something beautiful to my life. It is just darkness here. The streams are missing, there's just dusty decay. He asks the sun, who was sort of a friend in the last tracks, at least a companion of sorts, to bring magic back to his life. Bring the light back. Because without it, this place is just dreary. But then he says, "You're the vultures in trees." He says, "I know you're out there." This gets repeated over and over and over. I know you're out there, but vultures in trees. Is he still talking to the sun? Does he accuse the sun of preying? Oh no, vultures don't really prey, do they? They pick up what's left. They clean up the scraps. I don't know. He says, "You're the lanterns on lakes," which again could be magical. It reminds me of those, is it Japan that does it, where they put the paper lanterns on the lake and then they float away? Or maybe, I don't know if they put them on the lake. They definitely hover above the lake, though. That's what it makes me think of, though. Something very gorgeous. But then he says, "Your soccer balls on knees. Through your skirt I see your legs. Gracefully you're swaying and pleased." From Headwaters, he talks about um, watching somebody skillfully juggle a soccer ball as if the sun skillfully juggled the planets in our solar system. I don't know about that, man. Like with your explanation, I can kind of see it, but I would never come to that conclusion on my own. That's an interesting metaphor. But he wraps up this whole section with, "In mountainous peaks, I know you're out there. Don't let gravity win." What? I don't know. I think the gist of this track, though, is about losing the magic and the light in yourself, in your world, and wanting to get it back. And if the black ship is what you're running from, which is, like I said, anxiety, but maybe even now thinking about more traditional or even stereotypical versions of metaphors of black objects, depression, maybe even. This whole concept of being stuck in the dark and wanting to get out could be trying to escape depression, which anxiety can certainly come from. So, like I said, I don't understand every line, but I do think that that's what this track is generally aiming to explore. Wanting to return back to that childlike wonder and have light and brightness and magic in your life again. We're going to move on to track 3, Universe, not to be confused with track 5, Universe. From here, the tracks are going to get progressively longer. This one's 6 3/4. The next one's 9. Let's dive into Universe. bringing back some of that auxiliary percussion, the large bass drums almost. Maybe even, like compressed timpani? Temporarily shifting away from the guitar and tambourine. Some of these are very shrill.
Unveiled when I walk out of the canyon and see me start to
This one brings in a bit more of a somber beginning.
But who's there to see me?
The blown out drums are a decision, that's for sure.
No sun to block out, no bird of blaze. A close dark voice says,
do you really think there's anybody out there?
The delay on the double tracking too.
so what? No one sees me. What do I care now the black night has seized me on a mountain's mane? I climb to my claim, and I'm aimless, alone and unraveling, and above barren wastelands stare at me. They know my name.
What do you want?
Wild production on that. Is that still Phil?
I know I'll be in the air, and that my trail passes lions' lairs, and I see summits buried in more air, buried in space. There's no end inside. How many times have I learned this before? How many times have I made up this song?
Was that half step or microtonal? I don't know. That was. It locked back in. I think that was microtonal. That was interesting. That song starts out, once again, kind of where I expect the microphones. Indie rock, guitar, bass. I don't think the bass showed up at the beginning. I think it took a while. Vocals, though. One thing I noticed, kind of put a smile on my face when I kind of made this connection, is that I've been describing these songs as slow burns, which, yeah, that's not an inaccurate way to talk about them, but I think a more accurate way is a journey of such. Slow burns typically are about stacking new layers on top until you reach a final idea, where maybe every other piece is a fragment of the whole, and eventually you'll get all the pieces together and see the big picture. There are certainly other ways to do slow burns, but that is the most traditional, most common way. Start with the foundation and stack things up until you've put the entire thing together. Like, it's almost like listening to the process of building an idea, hearing each new idea come in by itself before the next one is added. That's not how we get it on these tracks, though. They are slow burns in the idea that we start from minimal and reach large. A full idea put on top of the foundation, but it's not always an idea of building blocks. There are plenty of ideas that show up and they'll exist for a moment and then never come back. This is what I mean when it's more of a journey. Imagine walking from one place to another, all of it on a dirt road. That foundation, what you are walking on, never changes. But what you see along the journey will change, and what you see at one point in the journey most likely won't follow you to the next. A car or an animal or an interesting building, those are all static. They're going to be there at that moment. They will still be a part of the journey, part of your memory and who you were throughout this entire event, but they won't be there at the end. That's how Phil writes these songs. We see things throughout and we do build over time. We reach a peak and a finale to the movement, but there's so many ideas that show up and then go away. For a song, an album about climbing a mountain, the concept of a journey is baked right into that. And for these songs to be very similar on the foundational level, at least solar system and universe. The sun was its own idea up until a point, and then it became something a bit more traditional for them. But for these songs to all share a similar DNA at the foundation, usually vocals, guitar, light acoustic guitar, light drumming, sometimes light bass work, and then to always build up new ideas that get removed and then others get built up and then removed. Yeah, it is a feeling of getting from one place to another. A lot of consistency in the baseline ideas, but a lot of novelty and new concepts showing up above that. Not in order to act as more foundation to build things on, but to influence and ascribe a specific emotion to an event, a portion of this track, just this 20 or 30 seconds needs to feel this way, so we will include this here. We don't need that emotion anymore. Chuck it out the window. What's the next emotion? How will we build that? What instruments need to be present then? That's how these songs have existed. I feel like it's a pretty big revelation for this album, for me at least. It explains why they're certainly slow burns, but don't feel like slow burns. It feels more linear, less loop based. The foundation's really the only thing with a pattern to it. Not even Phil's vocal lines follow ostinatos, where maybe the lyrics change, but the musical component, the rhythm and pitches, are consistent over time. You take any popular mainstream song right now, but through most decades, and listen to the vocal line. Forget about the words themselves. Just listen to the pitches. Verse 1, verse 2, they're going to be the exact same music. Different words, same musical idea. This is very common in a lot of music, not even just mainstream, but it's very common. You can pick just about any song and find this phenomenon happening. Here, though, once again, Phil seems to use whatever melodic or rhythmic idea makes sense for these words. He's exploring these emotions, this tale, in real time as he's singing and recording it. I'd be curious how much of the vocal stuff is pre-composed. My guess is that he has a general idea of how it's going to go, but I would wager if we listened to multiple takes of these songs, we would find discrepancies between the vocal deliveries on them, maybe in intonation, maybe in pitch, maybe even in general flow. I bet there's a lot of improv to it, because a lot of it comes down to what feels right in the moment. Without an emphasis on rigidity, to me, this album, and a lot of the microphones actually, is about expression. A lot of the foundational stuff needs to be locked in place. You compose it, you record it, done. That's how it is. But the vocal part always feels looser and more expressive to me. And that's why I've come to that conclusion there. What's this song doing though? Like I said, foundationally, very similar stuff to the last couple of tracks. It's got that raw indie rock thing going on, quiet vocals, minimal instrumentation. This one feels more somber though, particularly at the beginning. Something about the chord progression, more so than the instrumentation, just feels like it brings the song down more than we saw on Solar System, which is interesting because lyrically Solar System was about being in darkness and feeling lost and wanting, brightness, magic back in your life. It's about desiring positive vibes. But this one starts off a bit drearier, a bit more somber. Once again, we go through a lot of ideas. There's rising, escalating tension. We have falling intensity. Instruments pop up, instruments go away. It probably makes a lot of sense if you follow along with the lyrics and you can kind of catch maybe the emotional vibes. Maybe I'll do that on the next track. Have the lyrics pulled up and follow along. Maybe some of the isolated musical ideas make a lot of sense from that perspective. To me, it's just like the bass line is sort of somber, and then every once in a while we have some extra darkness or some extra grit or some extra tension thrown in, and then that dissipates and we're back to the bass line. I don't really have a strong understanding of the entirety of it all, how it's supposed to piece together into a full story or narrative. But I do generally feel this pacing, which I think I even talked about on The Sun, what was it, the sun or solar system, about how the instruments provide a pacing for the song that the lyrics don't. The lyrics, the vocal delivery gives the momentum, the music gives the direction, and I think that's still true even on track 3 here. And a lot of that has to do with what I just talked about, the linearity of the instrumentation versus the sort of staticness of the vocals, but a rapid delivery of them. But what I find really interesting here is the vocals, the expanded vocals on this. We have an entire long, held out, stagger, breathing, ooh or ah sound. It happens for like 2 minutes at the end of the track. What's going on there? There's minimal movement around it. It's just really creating this shimmering sound. I don't know if shimmering is necessarily the direction they wanted to take it, but a lot of the shimmer comes down to a lack of tonation, where many of the vocals are just not all hitting the pitches exactly together, and there's a lot of warble to it, a little bit of dissonance creeping in, as some of the vocal tracks are just a hair bit flatter, just a hair bit sharper than the others, and it creates a lot of variability in what this one pitch is. And that creates a warbleness to it, a lot of movement, which could be entirely intentional too. Otherwise, we would just have a drone. And despite being a bunch of instruments playing the same note and holding it out for minutes at a time, it doesn't feel drony. But then after that, we have Phil come in for like 4 more syllables, 5 more syllables, but he's not center like he's been all album. He's pushed out to the sides alongside the feminine vocals that have been doing the hum this entire time. What is all of this supposed to mean? I don't know, man. Just like the sun, it's one of those cases where I understand what's happening technically. I can explain how this song has been composed and created, but I don't understand the why or the what is going on here. Hopefully, it'll be like Universe, where getting into the lyrics explains a little bit more about it. But just to reiterate myself, feel a little bit like a broken record here. Phil's definitely playing around with more abstract ideas this time around. There's a chance that I just have to walk away not fully getting it this time around. Let's check out some lyrics. All right. I don't know what the song is about yet, but generally speaking, from a literal standpoint, we have the narrator coming out, talking to the sun, realizing the sun still isn't out yet. It's still nighttime, and choosing not to do that anymore before a voice asks Phil, asks the narrator. It uses Phil everywhere. Is Phil the narrator? Is this song about Phil? Anyways, it asks him, do you really think there's anyone out there? And he says, well, I'll just have to continue my trek anyways. The universe says, well, what do you want? And the narrator replies, I don't know. In an interesting way. We'll touch on that in a moment. But he says that I'll just continue on my way because my experiences are what defines me. But then also realizing that the experiences are something that's just going to continue, that there is no end in sight, which I'm glad this was brought up in the annotation. This is actually a line from The Glow Part 2, the idea that everything is just sort of endless. And Phil has a bit of a breakdown here. How many times have I learned this before? Have I made up this song before? Have I died up here before? Everything is just endless. He talks about how hidden tomorrow can be, that there's a heavy fog and a wide shadow. Gets worked up a little bit. After this, the choir kicks in. We'll touch on that in a second, but there's one really interesting thing here that I want to touch on. This just seems to be about self-doubt, trying to figure out what life is, what you're trying to get out of it, trying to figure out what your purpose is in life. What is the human experience? But the point where a voice says, "Do you really think there's anyone out there?" The narrator replies, "Uh-huh, uh-uh," implying yes, and then a delay, and then a no. But these 4 syllables have 4 specific notes tied to them that are repeated later on when the universe asks, "What do you want?" And instead of saying the 4 syllables, we just have 4 notes being played to imply them again. I think this is interesting. I did not pick up on this at all in the song, in the reaction to it. And I'm paying attention to stuff too. There's certainly details that are going to slide by me on any reaction, but I pay a lot of attention to music when I listen to it, more so than your average listener. And I miss this. If it wasn't for it popping up in the lyrics and someone writing an annotation about it, particularly bringing up a bit from the Headwaters pamphlet that signifies this, that this was actually intentional, that we were supposed to remember these 4 notes so that when they pop up later, we understand that they're about indecision, I would never have noticed this little detail. It's little things like that I both love and hate. It's so subtle that it's very easy to miss, but it is a fantastic Easter egg that, well, actually, it's really not an Easter egg. It's important lore for this story, both on the metaphorical and the literal description of what's happening here. This idea of indecision, of not understanding, is the core of this song, and trying to move forward despite having a core motivation in mind, just pushing forward because you need to do something. He says at one time, "I am aimless, alone, and unraveling, but that I know I'll be in the air, that I know my trail passes lions' layers, and I see summits buried in more air, buried in space. I'm just going to keep doing this stuff because I don't know what else to do." But is that all this is? An infinite treadmill of just doing stuff. That is where he begins to spiral towards the end of the track. Then we get the choir that comes in, which I didn't really pick up on this because I was focused on the intonation issues, which don't feel very calming to me. But the point of this was supposed to create a calming, placid singing style to calm the narrator down. It doesn't come across that to me. I think harmonically it is calming, but the execution of it is not, because I hyper focus on intonation where Phil doesn't seem to do that. But then the universe, Phil sings to the universe. He says, "I know you." And I think that's an interesting final line. The universe sings to him to calm down, and he says, "I know you." I don't get it. From Headwaters, it simply states that this is calm resignation. But I don't know. So let's push forth our penultimate track here, sitting at 9 minutes before a much shorter finale to the album, Mount Eerie, the title track. I really like this larger than life feeling right here.
I watched you across the something that I held on to is leaving. The shape to what I saw has slowly
was a dramatic shift, and I'm still trying to acclimate.
Smothered in my rumble, a flash of thunder booms, your lack of wonder looms. I press you to the ground, you'll fade from where you're found.
Not a big fan of that. Well, I'm glad it's gone. That heavy white noise and popping only on one side. Very unsettling. I like this melody though. The thunder's an interesting idea. Kind of bringing in some of the field recordings from track 1 back into play, setting a mood. A marching of something. The shore again. Or just white noise? I feel like there's some catching of the wind over on the right side occasionally. Could also be rain, I suppose. So that's two songs that transfer over on White Noise, the Sun to Solar System and Mount Eerie to Universe, which makes Solar System to Universe the only hard stop on the album. Every other track fluidly moves between each other. Alright, I'm just going to come out and say it. This song went right over my head. I enjoyed the hip-hop inspired middle section. Had a nice beat and groove to it. I liked the spoken word that was done on top of it. Different type of vocal inflection too, creating a bit of contrast on the album. Pretty much everything on the album feels very samey, and that section stands out among everything. I highly doubt Universe is going to do anything that is going to stand out as much as that moment did. So I liked it. It was different. It comes out of nowhere. I don't really understand it. I don't know that it works within the context of the entire album, but it does work in general. It's a cool moment that I might have enjoyed more in a different context. Maybe when I read the lyrics, it'll make sense. Like I mentioned earlier, Phil tends to write music for moments, so maybe whatever's happening there makes sense to push into this direction for some reason or another. But it doesn't really flow well coming out of it. We don't really have a lot of flow either. And a lot of this song, much like The Sun, is abstract sonic painting. As I mentioned, there's a lot of wind, there's thunder, there's white noise, which I originally read as, or interpreted as, that's what I wanted. The waves, but eventually took up maybe rain. There at the end, it continues to grow, and that reminded me of The Glow Part 2, which also ended on a rather somber tone where the penultimate song saw the narrator die. That one was called Samurai something? Samurai Sword, maybe? I I don't remember. Why can't I find this? Just it should be pretty simple. Oh, it was called Samurai Sword. And then the final track, My Warm Blood, was a short one that saw the narrator die. And so we have another song that seems to be going in that direction. This is a very somber track, heavy, melancholic, and ends similarly to the way Samurai Sword did. I'm curious if this is where we're going. I can't wait to hit the lyrics in full, although I will say I had the lyrics pulled up. As I said, I wanted to kind of see where things went, and there's a lot of lyrics. I did not pick up on a lot of them. However, it does end with vultures tearing the flesh off of something. So, is that Phil? Is that our narrator? We'll find out later as I get through the other 5 verses that I didn't pick up on because I was trying to figure out what's happening musically. Because the thing is, right, when I listen to stuff like this, music's first. I'm always engaging with that before anything else. The lyrics, if I have them pulled up or if I choose to listen to what they're saying, if they're clear enough in the song, which honestly, the vocal production's pretty clear on this album. I don't think I need the lyrics pulled up to listen to them. But regardless, it is always a secondary thing. After I figure out what's going on musically, if there's not a lot of change, I'll dive into the lyrics. I have a breather moment before we head into some new musical stuff. Let me see what's going on here. I didn't really get that on this track. It was consistently surprising me until the end where I was just confused by the abstract elements to it. I completely forgot to even look at the lyrics. But I think that's pretty much where I sit on this one. It starts out kind of where I expect it to. We have the, lo-fi indie rock stuff going on at the beginning. We do have more focus on the feminine vocals, though, which I found to be interesting. Phil doesn't get a lot of lines here. And then we have the hip hop part, which is darker, heavier, more focused. There's less ephemerality to the instrumentation. It feels more physically grounded, but also bassier. Maybe that's also what brings a lot of the physicality to it. It's very rhythmically charged. It's not really melancholic or brooding in the way that the rest of the album has been. It is right here, right now heaviness. And then from here, we just have white noise to wrap the song up. I don't know. I will say, though, that this is my least favorite song on the album so far. There is a hyper focus on vocal harmony. And the vocal harmony is tenser than it's ever been. I think particularly because there's more vocal lines than anywhere else. We have that entire section of just what sounds like 8 vocalists, 9, 10 vocalists, a big group of them singing together, rhythmically out of time with each other, harmonically out of space with each other. It's a really rough melody that I think perfectly encapsulates what what microphones does. It's raw, it's lo-fi, it's passionate, but it is not perfect. And I think that perfectly explains why I tend to enjoy parts of them and not others. And I think this section just did not work for me because it wasn't perfect enough. I don't need things to be robotically pristine, though I do really enjoy that too. That is a very cool aesthetic on its own, but it's not something I require in the music that I listen to. But I do have a threshold of not necessarily perfection, but rigidity of delivery. where I expect notes being played to have a specific level of intonation, for the instruments to be in tune to a specific level, where I expect the musicians playing to be in time with each other to a specific degree. Anything that deviates from that, I'm going or dips below the threshold, it reaches a point where I can appreciate it artistically but do not enjoy it sonically. That's where I sit with this track in particular, but also parts of this album, and every track. There are certainly places in every single song so far where I'm like, okay, I get what you're doing. I understand the emotional element here that you're aiming for, that I'm sure people who can hear past the the lack of perfection, where maybe they will get into it this way, but I don't. I can appreciate what you're doing, why people would come to it, but I don't like it. And this seems to be a song that is full of that, particularly in the beginning of it. And I'm kind of lost here. Not like narratively or artistically or thematically. I'm just lost attention wise. I did not enjoy this track. The ending is abstract noise, which again I can appreciate from a distance, but it's just noise. And the beginning is too imperfect for me to engage with casually as well, which left me with the middle section, which I quite enjoyed, but makes no sense musically in the context of the album. My favorite part is the aspect that had zero ties to anything else, that doesn't really justify its purpose here. This is an awkward song for me, and for it to be the climax of the album, it's the 9-minute big point. After this, we have a 4-minute conclusion, which, if it's going to be like Warm Blood, is just that, probably a single idea that wraps the song up, but isn't the climax. This is the denouement. So it I was here for most of this, right? Enjoying it from a bit of a distance, but here for it. And I think you lost me right here at the end. Let me hit some lyrics, figuring out some thematic elements. Maybe that will bring me back a little bit, as Microphones tends to grab me more on the lyrical side than the musical side. But we'll see. You got a lot of room to pull me back in at this point. Yeah. I'm not feeling this one. I think from a thematic perspective, there's some cool stuff in here. It is generally about hardships and the cycles of hardships and death. Maybe even as a commentary on life being a cycle of hardships and then you die. That there's just no positivity in there. And that goes along with the feeling of not having magic or light in your life. That if we are to take this as the whole of, you're happy, you're a child, and then you're on your own, which is the beginning of track 2, being left on the shore, trying to find your way through adult life on your own, while your family goes on and does their things. You're out on your own now. And from here, what you really enjoyed, the sun, it leaves within the first song, and you're left with just darkness and fear, guilt, and just a lack of wonder, wanting to get all that back, and then you can't. And so you choose to just trek on, which is the journey up this mountain. But here we will see the big black cloud continue to push him down. And he continues to try to climb, and it's this cycle. Makes some headway, gets pushed back down. Makes some headway, gets pushed back down. And at the end, he is dead, and the vultures are feasting on his corpse. That seems to be the worldview of this song. Life is great until you're an adult, and then it sucks, and then you die. That is bleak. There are bits of brightness throughout this album, but it's like single lines. Beyond the bleakness, though, the lyrics here just don't really work for me. At the start, he talks about being on a boulder over alpine tops, peeking over and watching the water in the evening. But there is the big black cloud who says, I'm watching you. Eventually says, your fingers will all go numb getting higher on the hill. But the big black cloud will come and press you to the ground. The air will leave your chest. You'll fade from where you found. When you find you're standing still and your fingers all go numb, getting higher on the hill. And this actually repeats itself twice over. The idea that you will make progress, you will be physically in pain from it. Your fingers will go numb, but then something will push you down, push the air out of your chest. You'll fade. You might get up and try again. But eventually, this cycle will end. And it won't end with you victorious. It'll just end with you not waking up after you fade one time. And then this is where the rhythmic, abrasive section kicks in. King Dark Death begins to sing. Do you see what happens when the big black death breathes on you? I'm wild and woolly, a bloating bully. I'll strike you down and I'll strike you down again. You see what happens? Your breath I take to live, your death I ache to give. So take me in and crumble, be smothered in my rumble. The lyrics are just so juvenile, which I'm not going to say that Phil always has masterpiece eloquent writing, but he tends to have something extra to say. This is all very surface level. I'm a big bad guy and I like to give people pain and suffering. And it's lacking nuance. It feels boring to listen to. I'm not a big fan of it. I'd love to hear another perspective on it. Maybe you find his lyric writing for this character really great. I want to hear that because I typically like Phil's writing, but this just doesn't click with me. Maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. But from here we move to the wind and the vultures. The wind is talking to the vultures. He says the way that they share, well, they're talking simultaneously, not necessarily to each other. He says the way that they share their feast, they invite each bite and then go into flight. The vultures say the flesh that we tear, it's innocent of memory. We feast, we invite the bite into our flights, but we give you our blood. Speaking to the wind here, maybe? The vultures then talk about a memory or two, talking about a candle falling, but also talking about a tablecloth, eyes of only a 3-year-old. This is presumably stories from Phil's childhood. The wind kicks in, says the way that they share the memories of the things you did wear, and now your song is inside them. This, I think, is the one part that really clicks for me thematically. The idea that even after Phil's death, his memories, his feelings, his emotions will exist in others, particularly, I think, through this idea of consumption. Though instead of vultures, which I don't know if this is purposeful or not, it is us, the audience, hearing his stories. Even when, if the dude might be immortal. No, even when Phil eventually passes on, as part of him will reside in every person who's listened to his music and every fan of what he's created. It makes me wonder then if he finds fans to be vultures, if he finds this idea consuming him, or if just the idea of vultures is the first animal he thought of for metaphorically eating his corpse in this story. But I do like that idea there, that his memories live on in others as he puts himself out there and bars his soul to the world to see. That he is ensuring a form of immortality as he is remembered for his art. It's a beautiful ending here that still I feel like it tries to say something meta-contextual about art and artists while still existing within a rather bleak narrative overall about the hardships of life and then death. It feels at ends with itself, this meta message and the contextual message. But it does line up with the other meta level, though, in that a lot of Microphone's albums and music are sort of depressingly bleak. This feels and is actually quite interesting. Was it Universe where he sang the lines, "How many times have I sung this song?" Yeah. How many times have I made up the song before? How many times have I died up here? This feels very much like a condensed down Glow. It's a little bit shorter, but also I feel less impactful because it doesn't really hit all of the same moments. This ending doesn't quite hit me as hard because we spent so much time on pre-existence, rushed through a majority of that, just so we could hit two bleak songs and then immediately kill the narrator again. If I were to take these two tracks, I think Mount Eerie, or these two albums that are doing pretty much the same thing, I think Mount Eerie is the more abstract artistic one. There's a lot of really neat ideas in here, but more affecting, I think, Glow. You already did this once and it was better, in my opinion. I'm curious what the point of Mount Eerie was then, and people who find this album to be better than the Glow Part 2, or maybe it resonates with you more, why? Can you put into words and kind of give me your perspective of that? It is more condensed, it's a shorter experience, it's more abstract, and maybe the abstraction is more impactful for some, but I find it lacks the nuance to hit the same highs that the Glow did for its ending to be as impactful as it was. As it is right here, at this point, the penultimate track, Samurai Sword of the Glow Part 2, I was broken. Here I'm like, yeah. Part of that's probably because this peak just didn't work for me musically. Mount Eerie bounced off of me really hard where Samurai Sword didn't. But I don't think we've spent enough time here to have any sort of emotional impact. It's too short. It's like films that don't explain a character. They don't give it any, secondary traits. It's just a very two-dimensional character, and then they kill them off, and they expect you to be sad for this character that you never had a chance to really care about to begin with. That's kind of how I feel here, despite this being a continuation, and maybe Phil is banking on the fact that you're emotionally invested because of previous material from the Microphones. But I just don't feel like I've spent enough time with this narrator to have any sort of emotional connection, to feel their death in any way other than, well, that's a plot point. And that feels bad because this is a very raw emotional experience of an album. I'm just not clicking with it in that way at all. Let's wrap this up. We're going to listen to the final song, Universe. There's a bit of white noise here at the beginning of it carried over from Mount Eerie.
Now that I have disappeared,
or not.
I have my sight. Beautiful black, you are unveiled. Now you're mine. So let my voice bellow about you, silent night. Let my voice echo out from caves in mine.
Very unstable.
Have a bright disguise. Mountains and light. But universe, I see your face in blackest night.
I like that uplift. It just.
Oh, universe, I see your face looks just like mine.
See, and that's supposed to feel revelatory, I think.
We are
And it just feels eerie. The compression also too. That chord right there does not work for me. All right, so a little bit different of a take than Warm Blood. Lyrically, this song is about dying and becoming one with the universe in all of its grace and beauty. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap this up. Less bleak, I think, than the story of Mount Eerie was leading towards. But musically, I am not on board for this at all. The majesty, they're aiming for it. I think the chords are generally there, but the musicianship is not. Many of these vocals are way out of tune with the vocals around them. That one higher pitch chord that we got every once in a while, it feels more like a horror stinger, something you would use to imply a killer is around the corner, something you would use during a jump scare. It's the type of hypertension that was used in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in order to create those stabbing stingers during the shower scene. It's unstable intonation that creates warbly variance. It creates dissonance. It creates a very tense, goosebumps down the spine feeling. It makes me contrast and recoil. It does not make me feel relaxed. It does not make me feel awe. It does not make me feel like I'm in the presence of something majestic and powerful. It makes me feel like I am in the presence of something I should be fearing, something I should recoil from. A lot of this song feels that way to me. Like I said, I think what's written on paper is fine. It creates something very gorgeous and majestic. It's just not played as to what's written. The chord that is written is not sung perfectly. And it creates something imperfect through it, which is possibly intentional. Depending on your perspective of the universe, it is either amazingly pristine and gorgeous in all that it's done, or it's wildly chaotic and imperfect, and what's come through it is all wild chance, that not all of it is perfect. It's just a bunch of things that happen to work well together through chaos, through entropy. In that latter description of the universe, I think the song does a good job, something that sort of implies beauty through its imperfections. I don't like listening to this though. And I like that, again, from an artistic perspective, I think that works. But it creates a song that I can enjoy only at arm's distance, something that I think is artistically impressive and interesting, but that I'd never want to listen to again. It also sort of subverts everything too, though. This album has been very dreary from start to finish. It has been something that has been progressively darker, with the sun sort of being a borderline sort of dreariness, solar system leaning into that a bit more, universe bringing in the more melancholic side, and Mount Eerie getting dark and depressive with bleak lyrics. For all of that to dip away and go for a bright, optimistic ending here feels distinctly out of character with the album. Nothing has really nothing has led up to this at all, lyrically or musically. It comes out of nowhere, almost as if to say, Phil got tired of writing dark songs. He wanted something a little bit more neutral, positive. But it lacks follow through in the entirety of the album. I mean, it's almost as if our narrator and Phil's character in general just takes a random 180 that hasn't been led up to at all. And I think this just kind of leans into the idea that I feel like this is too contained. In ways, the Glow Part 2 is too long. There might be a little bit too much to it, and there's certainly some songs that just repeat themselves. The themes just get repeated to really drill them into you, to a point that I'm pretty sure I made the comment that some of the songs could have been cut and the album would have not lost anything from it. Here, though, we definitely need more. If you want this turn, then I need to see Phil's journey, showcase it. There was nothing in here that really said that Phil embracing the darkness and finding beauty through that was going to be a big plot point. There's no turn here. Phil is a two-dimensional character who makes a heel turn at the end of this album for no reason. From a narrative perspective, this makes no sense, and that bottoms out and completely destroys any thematic or meta-contextual element to it. Themes really can, like metaphorical themes, really depend on having strong literal readings too. You need the story to be sound for the metaphor and morals and figurative element to be strong. You can certainly make stories that are purely metaphorical, where the literal parts are just kind of nonsense. I feel like they're less effective, though. And I'm kind of feeling that here, too. I think the idea of taking an album super bleak and then subverting that and coming out the other end with not necessarily a feel-good ending, but something a bit more neutral, positive, is a fantastic thing. In fact, it's something I really need from something like this, because I'm not a big fan of hyper bleak stuff. It really gets me down. I would prefer to have a little bit more of a positive spin at the end, but it's got to be earned. You can't just shoehorn it in there, and I feel like that's what happened here. Otherwise, though, I like the concept of this song. The idea of representing the cosmos, the universe, as he called it, the beautiful black of the universe. The at one point says, "I see your face, it looks just like mine, and we are wide open." I really like this idea of becoming one with it, understanding that you're not an isolated component in the universe, that you are part of the whole, that you are never lonely, and that it's all open for interpretation, to just expose it all out there, to be vulnerable, to be understood. I think there's some wonderful ideas here, and to represent the universe as this giant choir of people. 100%. Lovely idea. And I really want to enjoy this. I think from a conceptual perspective, this is a solid ending to this album. And it's a solid direction in general of just representing um, this concept that we've been talking about here, which is, the universe, the sun, the solar system. We've been exploring this metaphorically into the ideas of isolation. And realizing that just because you might feel alone doesn't mean that you are. That just because the sun is there by itself in the middle of the solar system, millions of miles away from anything else, that doesn't mean that it's alone. It's still part of a much larger whole, even if it's difficult to see. The themes are fantastic. The execution just leaves me wanting quite a bit. But like I said at the very beginning, and have repeated a couple of times, this is more abstract. Just because I don't like the way it was presented doesn't mean someone else will also dislike it. There's probably plenty of people who hear this and are absolutely sent over the moon for the musical themes, the lyrical themes, and they absolutely engage with this and feel it, and it brings them to tears every time. I sort of envy that. It's just, to me, it's lacking a bit of the precision I would need to emotionally engage with that side. Raw can certainly do it, but this was just a hair bit too raw for me, and a bit too short. As I said, maybe just another track or two to explain the narrator's bit of turn and to help sell the ending here. I suppose that maybe the idea of having your memories passed on, and then maybe it's this spiritual revelation of being part of the universe that sells this. But we're talking about 2 lines out of 40 minutes of music that are supposed to showcase this massive turn at the end. And it just doesn't work for me. But these are just my thoughts on the Microphones' Mount Eerie album. What do you think of it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe have your own thoughts or opinions about it. Also, perspective, man. My perspective on this is definitely mine. I think there's a lot of things I said today that certainly line up with the ways that I appreciate and have talked about music in the past. It's going to be different from others. If you have a different perspective or opinion or take on any of this, please, I want to hear them. As usual with music that just doesn't work for me, sometimes it just takes a new perspective to enjoy it or to understand it in a better way. And so I'm looking forward to that if anyone can and wants to share. Please put all of that in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a live stream. We hang out, check out 10 songs. We talk about it. We get off topic. We talk about all sorts of stuff. It's just a really chill hangout session that also includes a little bit of musical exploration. Like I said, there will be 10 songs, as always. It's very chill, very relaxed, very cool. If you can make it, I highly suggest you give it a shot. Otherwise, I'll be back Monday, though you can catch your daily dose of critical reactions, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.